access is no longer a function of insufficient providers or insufficient students. It's actually a function of insufficient infrastructure, which is a very different way of approaching higher education policy. So I have 12 minutes to talk about why the fundamentals of higher education policy are no longer correct, how if we don't address those, we're not going to get to any of the questions we're really concerned about, like cost, price, and persistence, and then some ways we might get there. So I'm going to dive right in. So I'm going to talk access and post-access eras. First, I want to go to the root of the question of why we subsidize anything. So why, as a society, do we subsidize something? And I would argue there's two necessary elements. First is that the thing we subsidize should be a public good. But that is, while that is necessary, it is not sufficient. There are plenty of public goods that we don't subsidize as a society. So bicycle riding, for instance, environmental health, or environmental values, health values, but we don't subsidize the bicycle market. Newspaper publishing is another. We don't subsidize the newspaper market. So we as a society do decide that one, is it a public good, and two, is the market not going to provide it on its own. In our 20th century, even slightly before, in the late 1800s, we basically decided that yes, college is a public good, and we do want to subsidize it, and the market will not fulfill it. And at that time, in the late 1800s, college was pretty clearly defined. It was a clear, time-delimited residential environment with a cohort of people and professors. There wasn't much deviation from that model. There wasn't much moving from school to school. It was what it was. There weren't many providers, and to address that, the Morrill Act created the land-grant colleges. We've seen community colleges grow to address that as well. There weren't many consumers, so students. The population was much smaller than it is now, and the percentage of the population that wanted to go to college was much smaller than it is now. So there really wasn't a viable market for college in the late 1800s, really going all the way through until after World War II, when we created additional incentives to go to college with the financial aid system to subsidize, to ostensibly lower the price of college. And so that's the regulatory model that we had been under, which tied accreditation to financial aid policy really ever since, at least since World War II. Now, if you look at the characteristics of today, really over the last decade, it looks really almost exactly the opposite. So college is not well defined now. It is not a residential environment where people go to one place and stay there for 4 years, at least not for a majority of the students. It is for some, but not for most. It is not time delimited in many cases. Students are transferring credits from place to place to place. There are very different modalities with different cost structures associated with it. And really, we don't really even know what it should be. There are certificates that are being offered by colleges. There's adult ed programs. There's online programs. We don't really know what college is anymore. Or put another way, there's lots of different options for it. Second is there are many providers, 6,000 colleges in the US alone. Not only are there lots and lots of colleges, their geographic reach is now global. It used to be that geographic reach was confined to a fairly small geography, and public institutions had a fairly defined geographic, essentially catchment area. Not so anymore. Now there are 4,000 providers in a global marketplace, so any student has access to lots and lots of providers. Second is now there are many students where there didn't used to be the number of students anymore. Not only has the population grown, but the percentage of students who do want to go to college has grown as well. There are much fewer rural areas that can't support a college. So we're looking at a very different marketplace with very different characteristics now than we had when we've created the regulatory structure that we currently live under.